So for the past few months, I've been shooting with the Sony a6700 right next to the a7 IV and the ZV-E1, which are both cameras that should heavily outperform the a6700, but I've had a really hard time telling the footage apart. All of the cinematic functions in the a6700 that are working well for me, coming at you. So out of the box, you want to switch the camera into manual mode as well as movie mode to be able to access all the settings that we're going to be talking about in today's video. For our autofocus settings, the first thing I want to talk about is how to use the screen to do touch tracking and be able to tap on any subject you want and track it. To do that, we're going to go into the menu. I'm going to go to the bottom toolbox here, the yellow tab over here, number 5 under touch operation, under touch pan. First off, make sure your touch operation is set to on. And then for your touch panel settings, we're going to go to shooting screen and then down here to touch function in shooting and make sure that is set to touch tracking. And then let's talk about the actual autofocus speeds, which is really important. So down here on the AF/MF purple tab, we're going to go to AF/MF. We have these two settings here. Autofocus transition speed. I'll typically, for a shot like this, an interview or like a studio shot, I'm gonna have this really low. And if you ever have a situation happen where you're noticing that there's a lot of pulsing on the edges of your frame, it's likely because you have a shot like this. The lens does matter here, but generally speaking, you have your autofocus cranked up way too high. I typically keep this a lot lower, if not all the way down here at the first settings. Now, if it's a fast moving subject, I'll crank it up to something a lot faster to keep up with the action. I'll do the same thing for the autofocus subject shift sensitivity. Same idea, fast moving subject, I'm way up here. And then something a lot slower like this, I'm usually down on 2 or 1 for locked on. And trust me, it's plenty fast to keep up with a really simple shot that we're looking at right now. One thing you can do for this autofocus transition speed, let's say you want to use the back of the camera to tap and do like a rack focus. What I'll usually do for that is I'll usually have it a lot slower, like 2 or 3, to have a natural kind of transition between two subjects. The a6700 has a really cool feature that allows us to really dial in our shutter speed. If we want natural motion blur, we want our shutter speed to be exactly twice the amount of our frame rate. So for example, if I'm shooting in 24 frames a second and I want good motion blur, I want my shutter speed to be at exactly 1/48. Previously with these cameras, we'd be stuck at using something like 1/50, which is close to a 48 shutter, but it's 50, so it's a little bit higher. In the camera here, if you go to the third tab on number 5 here under shutter/silent, anti-flicker setting, if you turn that on, you'll have the ability, looking at my shutter down here, to get a lot more precise with your exact shutter speed. And in this case, for 24 frames a second, we can get that dialed in at exactly 48. As we're going through this, you might notice that you're coming across some menu items that you're gonna wanna find really quickly. My menu, so at the very top here, this star, you can customize these My Menu tabs and put whatever menu item that you want in there. How you do that, under My Menu setting, go to Add Item, and you can find whatever item you want to add into your shortcutted My Menu system and build out your own custom tabs. I have a few videos planned for this a6700 on the channel that I'm really excited about, as well as a couple of in-depth guides on exposure, as well as white balance. Not the most exciting topics, but ones that are gonna make your videos look really good if you can get it right. Anyways, if you wanna see those, make sure you subscribe down below. And while you're down there, if you're getting something from this video, let me know by giving it a tap on the thumbs up. Our codecs, different frame rates, and color options are probably one of the more important things with this camera, and the a6700 gives us a ton of updated and high-end features. I'm on the third tab here, number 1, image quality and recording. File format, we have a few options. Let's talk about the 4K stuff. That's probably what we're shooting. If you have this camera, we have XAVC HS 4K, XAVC S 4K, and XAVC SI 4K. XAVC SI is technically your highest quality. They're also massive file sizes. XAVC S 4K is one of the most common Sony codecs, and the files are really nice and they're not too big. And then you have XAVC HS, which is my preferred codec. The only problem with this one is that it's an H.265 file, so you gotta make sure that your computer can actually handle H.265 files before using it. Otherwise, you're gonna have some issues. But technically, it's a high quality file that's a really small file type, so it's kind of the best of all worlds there. I actually can't tell the difference between these three in terms of quality. More on that in just a second. And then under movie settings, you can first have your frame rate options here. Now, if you're using something like XAVC S, you're probably gonna have like 30p in here, and XAVC HS, we don't have 30, so you might see different frame rates if you're not using XAVC HS. For regular motion stuff, I'm shooting in 24p, and then for slow motion, you can use either 60 or 120. I'm typically using 60 more recently because I'm kind of getting tired of 120, but this camera can shoot 120 and the files are really nice coming out of it there. Next, under record settings, again, these will look a little bit different depending upon which codec that you're using, but here's our options in XAVC HS24P, and it's the same general rule of thumb regardless of what codec you're using. I'm gonna be using the highest megs possible. In this case, that's 100 megs to get the best looking video, and then always shooting in 422 with 10-bit color. Nice that they included 10-bit color in this a6700. It's one of my favorite things about this camera. The truth is though, between like 8-bit and 10-bit, we don't even have any 8-bit options with XAVC HS. And other codecs you will. 10-bit, you just have way more flexibility over your colors if you want to be changing the colors, and I just think generally speaking 10-bit looks a lot better. But I'm gonna let you be the judge if you can tell the difference between XAVC SI, XAVC S, and XAVC HS while I tell you about today's video sponsor, which is audio. Using audio for copyright-free music and sound effects has unlocked my creativity, and I've used it for all of my recent YouTube videos. Having a vast library is really valuable, and audio crushes it with that, but it's not just stock music, it's music made by real artists, and I always feel great about putting it in my videos. It's really helped me upgrade my edit with sync-worthy premium sound, and their sound effects library I think is one of the most underrated things on the entire platform. So if you need copyright-free music or sound effects, you don't want to have any stress about any copyright claims, and you want really high quality stuff, you gotta join me on Team Audio. And check the special link down below using this code to save 70% off your first year. It's already an incredibly valuable platform without that 70% off, so make sure you take advantage of that. I'm not sure how long they're gonna make that thing last. Thank you, Audio, for sponsoring the video. I couldn't be happier to work with y'all. Another cool feature that the a6700 has is the ability to install our own custom LUTs and look at that footage in camera before we even get into post. Here's how to do it. First thing you wanna do is put your SD card in your computer and then put whatever LUT file that you wanna end up putting on the camera, put that LUT file in this exact place on the SD card. After that, once you put your SD card in the camera, here's how you find your LUT. I'm on this pink tab under number 5, Color and Tone, Manage User LUTs. You can import your LUTs here. So once you have the LUT stored on the SD card in the right spot, it's gonna pop up here and you can assign it to whatever container that you want. After that, you can select the LUT right here. And I'm using Sony's conversion LUT, their official S-Log3 to Rec 709 conversion LUT. I think that's the best one. And I'll put a link down below if you want to check that LUT out. Now, if you're doing a workflow like I am, where you're using your conversion LUTs because you want to be shooting in S-Log3, here's how you actually display that information. Back over here in the 3rd tab, we're going to go to number 1, and all the way down here in log shooting setting, you want to turn log shooting on. This is what's going to give the ability, and you put S-Gamut3 Cine to S-Log3 if that's the same workflow that you're using like I am. And then when you go back over to this color and tone piece, in my case, this user 1, this is the exact conversion LUT. You're gonna see that in camera, exactly what the log footage converted over to Sony's official conversion LUT is going to look like. You also have the ability here to embed the LUT file. I choose not to. When that's on, your actual LUT is going to be embedded into your footage when you look at it in post. When it's off, like I have it, you're just seeing it on the back of the camera the way it's going to look once you apply that actual LUT in post. So completely up to you. I tend to keep it off and just look at it in post. That way my file is always just a log file just in case something funky happens. Moving into our custom buttons, and this is a huge efficiency hack for this camera because out of box, I don't think the buttons are laid out all that well for video shooting. Here's how I have mine laid out. Down here on the toolbox, we're gonna go to Operation Customize, and this is for photo, this is for video. And in the video setting, what you can do, yours is gonna look different than mine right now. We'll go through each of these. How you map something is just go to the one you want to map. Let's say I want to map my AF on button here, for example. I'm going to click that and I can go through the menu and find whatever I want to attach to that button. My first button, this C1 button here on the side, I have that mapped to audio record level, something we use all the time in video shooting. Just a quick tap on that and I can change my audio levels really quickly. Number 2, this is just the AF on button and I've mapped this over to white balance. And yes, on the camera, you technically can use the touchscreen to access white balance as well as some other things. Maybe I'm old school, but I like having the manual buttons for these. It is nice though with this camera, let's say you're doing like a vlog style shot, camera screen's flipped out, being able to tap and change things is nice. But generally speaking, I like to have these custom mapped. So when I tap my AF on button, I can quickly just access different white balance settings. I'm typically using a Kelvin setting, so just manually changing my white balance. This is not a full tutorial on white balance. That video is coming in the future, like I mentioned. Critical to make your videos look good, but I'm typically just manually selecting my white balance setting via this Kelvin meter here, or I'll be in auto white balance if I want to just have the camera do the work for me. And on my auto white balance, you might be noticing mine says auto white. There's a difference between how the camera handles, particularly like the warmer tones, if you're in regular auto white balance or auto white balance white. I prefer the tones in auto white balance white, even though it's like an incredibly minuscule difference. Here's how to change that. Back in my menu system, I'm gonna go to this 4th tab and I'm gonna go to the white balance setting, and then right here, priority set in auto white balance. Out of camera, it's gonna come in this auto white balance standard that we just looked at, or you can change it to auto white balance white. And then my trash can button down here, this is gonna be my auto white balance lock toggle. When you're in auto white balance and you let the camera get the scene, it takes about 10 to 15 seconds. Let the camera get the tones of the scene and adjust its own auto white balance. And then what you can do when you tap this C3 button, in this case, this trash can, you can lock the white balance so that way it won't change the tones as the scene might change a little bit. You can lock that off and not have any color shift, and then it won't unlock or start getting auto white balance again until you toggle it off, and then the camera will do its thing and calibrate the white balance. Moving into tab 2, these 2 buttons here I have set to my zebra levels, which is my preferred method to getting exposure, that being something of the utmost importance to get good looking videos. What I have, and when I hit left on my dial, it's gonna bring up my zebra levels and I can just cycle through those. And then when I tap my center button, I'm gonna be toggling zebras on or off to be able to see those when they're popping up on those different levels. Video coming in the very near future about nailing your exposure. That's how I have mine set for quick access. And then my right button, I have that set to not set. That's because, I'm gonna jump ahead here for a second, I have my wheel set to ISO. So as I spin this wheel, my ISO is gonna be increasing. And maybe it's just me, maybe I'm heavy-handed, but whenever I'm twisting my ISO wheel, I tend to like press down on that right button, and the last thing I want is for some function that I don't want access to at that time to pop up. So I just leave that one not set. And then pressing down is gonna bring up my focus area, and I can cycle between the different type of focus areas that I want. And when you do that, you might find you have more options here. These are the 3 that I use the most. I'll explain how to minimize your actual options in a second. Wide I typically use for touch tracking. Zone gives me the ability to just choose a section that I want to have the focus on, and then expand spot. It's gonna focus on whatever's in that inner box as well as anything that's just outside of it for really dialed in focus. How to change, because I think there's like 6 or 7 options when you cycle through your different focus areas. How to change that, I'm gonna go to this AF MF tab here. Under focus area, when you go over to focus area limit, whatever you have checked are the ones that are gonna show up when you try to cycle through your different focus areas. This center one, to me, might as well just use zone or the expandable spot and put it in the middle. And then this small, medium, and large spots, kind of the same thing as expand spots. Trying to minimize the noise and the options that I have for fast turnaround. And the top of the camera, this 3rd tab, this first red button here I have set to picture profile. So I'm in log shooting right now, so I can't actually bring up my picture profile. This red record button we have up top, it's really nice, it's cool that they have that. But if you go into your menu and you go to the bottom here under Operation Customize and you go to Record with Shutter and set that to on, when you just tap your shutter button on top of the camera, the same one you use to take photos, it'll start and stop recording, which will free up an extra button, in this case the red button, to be used for a different customizable option, which, like I just mentioned, I have that one set to picture profile. 90% of the time I'm shooting in log and using my installed LUTs to do that, but if I want to shoot in something like S-Cinetone, I turn my log shooting off, tap that for picture profile, pull up PP11, and now I'm in S-Cinetone. The second one here, the C2 button, this is what I have set for focus standard. So let's say I want to change that focus point right there. How I would have to change where that's actually positioned, I would have to go to hitting down on my wheel, pull up my focus area, go to zone, set it, hit down again, go to this expand spot, and now I can move it around, right? Kind of annoying, a lot of steps there. Or, because I've mapped that focus standard to C2, if I just tap C2, It lets me move that focus point around with just one click of a button. And this fourth tab, if you happen to have a lens that has a customizable button, I have mine set to focus mode so I can just toggle between autofocus or manual focus. And then lastly, for my wheels, this front dial, I have that set for aperture. My back one I have set to shutter speed, and this back wheel here, like we've already talked about, that is set to ISO. I found that setting my most frequently used settings and functions to my customizable buttons is absolutely the way to go, but there's still ones that are really good and the ones that I still use often, but not quite as often as the ones I just map to my custom buttons. For those ones, I put in my function menu. So when I'm in this function menu, up top is for photos. We're talking about video today. You can customize all of these as well. How to change them, just select the slot you want, just like on our custom buttons, go through the menu, and you can map whatever you want to that area. Pulling up the actual function menu here, we're gonna look at what I have set. First thing is focus mode. This is toggling between autofocus and manual focus. Yes, that's redundant. Seems inefficient, right? Because I just talked about having that set to the customizable button on the lens, but I don't always have a lens that has a customizable button, so I want to make sure that I have quick access to toggling from autofocus to manual focus. And these three are all of my codecs, frame rates, and bit rates that we talked about. So quick access to be able to change if I want to be an XAVC HS, S, or SI, what frame rate I want, I can get that really quickly there. And then lastly, my actual record setting, I can quickly access that with that one. So these three used all the time. And then we have these two settings, which are gonna look familiar. This is how I can quickly access them, my autofocus transition speed, as well as my autofocus subject shift sensitivity. This next one here is my peaking display. So when I'm in manual focus, I can turn my peaking set to on, and then we're gonna get those dancing ants around whatever is in focus. Steady shot is next. This camera does have the ability to go into active stability. You're gonna get a 1.1 times crop on that, but you're gonna get a lot better stability for like handheld shots or like a vlog style shot. Standard or off is what I'll have if I'm like locked off on a tripod. And the nice thing about the a6700 is that it's a high megapixel sensor. So it's downsampling a 6K image to 4K. What's cool about that is when we go into, even if it's a 1.1 crop on active, if you crop in on a true 4K sensor, you might lose a little bit of quality. Because we're downsampling from 6K to 4K, you're not gonna notice much of a quality loss here whatsoever. And these last three are my auto framing. This camera comes with some of the new features of that auto framing, which is something that I didn't know I needed until I first had it in the ZV-E1, especially if you're like a solo shooter. Having the ability to almost have a look like someone's filming you is pretty cool. So I can turn my auto framing simply just on or off via this function here. And then my crop level, you can go something wide, medium, or tight. All have their different uses. And then lastly, the framing tracking speed. I found that just like autofocus, just have this match whatever the action is. If it's fast action, make it fast. If it's slow action, make it slow for the most natural look. Memory recall. So with this camera, pick your most common style of shot, and then put all of your settings together, right? Your frame rates, your shutter speed, your ISO, your white balance, put all of your settings that you want, literally everything, autofocus speeds, everything. Put that in, and then when you go here, you're gonna go to camera set memory. You can assign, you have 3 containers, so do this for each of your most common style of shots. And then when you tap this, it's gonna assign all of those settings to that container. You can then repeat that process for number 2 and 3. Instead of putting the camera just in manual mode, you can put it in container 1, 2, or 3, and that's what's gonna give you the ability to just quickly access those settings. If you wanna see how I have mine set up for number 1, 2, and 3, a studio shot, a vlog shot in slow motion, or my most common 3, if you wanna see every single detail of how I have that set up, there's a free link below. I've got a video walkthrough to show you exactly that. There are a few like random annoying settings that we're gonna wanna take into consideration. The first one, I'm down here under this toolbox, and I wanna go down to Finder/Monitor. So under this one here, select Finder or Monitor. Out of box, it's gonna come in auto. So anything that you put behind your viewfinder, it's gonna automatically just turn off the back of the screen or just switch it over to the viewfinder. So I have this set to Monitor Manual, which means that the monitor is what's always on. The back of the screen display is always on until I come in here, maybe switch it over to putting it on the viewfinder. This monitor brightness, sunny weather is gonna drain the battery a bit faster, but it's always gonna make the screen really bright compared to manual where it's not quite as bright. Still down here on the toolbox, I'm gonna go to number 9, and then over here, auto power off temp. So when you first turn on the camera, it might have you change this. If you happen to miss that and your camera is set to standard, it might overheat a little bit more frequently than you want it to. I have this set to high and I've had no overheating issues with the camera yet. And then this power save start time. Out of box, it comes in somewhere around like 1 or 2 minutes, I think. And essentially what that means, if you just turn the camera on, let it sit in this case for 2 minutes, it's gonna just turn off, right? And you gotta go back in, like retoggle it on and off. It's kind of annoying. I have mine set to 30, just in case I wanna set the camera up, get the studio set up, and then start shooting. I don't want it just to turn off in the meantime. I also don't want it set to off, where if I happen to leave my camera on and put it in my bag, it's gonna kill the battery. So 30 minutes is the median that works well for me. If you're wondering how to get the red frame around the screen when you're actually recording, if you go to this third tab, we're gonna go to number 10, shooting display, emphasize record display, set that to on. The a6700 is really fun for video, and I've been really impressed with the results that I'm getting, but it's also a really capable photography camera. If you want to see how I have my Sony a6700 set up for photography, as well as some of my favorite photos that I've ever taken, you want to check out this video where I dive into all of that. Anyways, I'll see you in the next one. Take care. See ya.